What's wrong with your face? Who did this to you? I fell. The morning sun barely touched the floors of the mansion when Dante Nakamura descended the grand staircase. His footsteps were silent, calculated, like everything else about him. At 34, he built an empire that made men twice his age bow their heads in respect and fear. His tailored black suit held no creases. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and his expression revealed nothing. But something was off today. Sophia stood in the corner of the main hall, her back turned, shoulders hunched as she arranged fresh flowers in a crystal vase. Her usual grace was missing, replaced by stiff, hurried movements. Sophia, his voice cut through the silence like a blade. She flinched. In the 6 months she'd worked here, he'd never seen her do that. "Good morning, Mr. Nakamura," she said without turning around. Her voice sounded strained, tight. Dante's eyes narrowed. He crossed the room in 5 long strides and positioned himself where he could see her face. That's when he saw it. A dark crimson stain marked her left cheekbone, partially hidden beneath makeup that hadn't quite done its job. Her bottom lip was swollen on one side, and when she finally met his gaze, he saw something that made his blood run cold. "What happened to your face?" "I fell. Last night." "It's nothing really." She turned back to the flowers, her hands trembling so badly that a white lily slipped from her fingers and tumbled to the floor. Dante didn't move. He'd interrogated enough people to know a lie when he heard one. But this wasn't business. This was Sophia, the woman who hummed old soul songs while she cleaned, who left sticky notes with terrible jokes on his coffee maker, who somehow made this cold mansion feel less empty. "Look at me." It wasn't a request. Sophia's hand stilled. Slowly, she turned and he saw the full extent of it. Not just the blood stain, but the finger-shaped bruises peeking out from beneath her collar. The way she held her left arm close to her body. The defeat in her brown eyes that no amount of pride could hide. "Everyone out," he said quietly. His 3 guards positioned at various points in the room exchanged glances but obeyed without question. The heavy doors closed with a soft thud. "Mr. Nakamura, please. I need this job. I promise it won't happen again. I'll cover it better." Sophia's lips pressed together. A single tear escaped down her cheek, and she wiped it away quickly as if crying was something shameful. "It doesn't matter. It matters to me." Those 4 words hung in the air between them. Dante hadn't meant to say them with such intensity, but there they were, raw and honest. Sophia's shoulders began to shake. Then like a dam breaking, everything poured out. "His name is Trevor. We've been together for 2 years. He wasn't always like this. I swear. After my ex-husband left, Trevor helped with bills with my daughter. But then he started controlling everything. Where I go, who I talk to, how I spend money. Last night, I told him I got a raise here. And he said I was probably sleeping with you to get it when I defended myself." Her voice cracked. "I have an 8-year-old daughter. Mister, he knows where she goes to school. He said if I ever left him or told anyone, he'd make sure I never saw her again." Dante's jaw clenched so hard it hurt. A cold rage settled over him. The kind that made him dangerous. The kind that had built his reputation. But when he spoke, his voice was surprisingly gentle. "Does Bella know? I always make sure she's asleep before things get bad. Where is she now?" "My neighbor watches her in the mornings before school." Dante pulled out his phone and made a call. "Kenji, send 2 men. 2. He glanced at Sophia, who whispered an address. "Send 2 of our best discreet protection detail for an 8-year-old girl and her guardian. No one approaches them without clearance." Sophia's eyes went wide. "Mr. Nakamura, you don't have to. What's Trevor's full name and address? I can't ask you to get involved in my mess. You've been nothing but kind to me, and I won't drag you into Sophia." He stepped closer, and she instinctively stepped back until her spine hit the wall. But he didn't crowd her. Instead, he maintained just enough distance to feel safe, while making sure she heard every word. "I'm already involved. The moment you walked through my door with his marks on you, I became involved. Now give me his information, or I'll find it myself. Your choice is only whether you help me or not." She told him everything. Trevor Brooks lived in a rundown apartment complex on the east side, the kind of place where people minded their business because asking questions got you hurt. He was a shift manager at a warehouse, played cards on weekends, and had a reputation for talking big. When Dante and 2 of his men arrived at 8 p.m. that evening, Trevor was home. They could hear his television through the thin walls. Dante knocked once, twice. The door swung open, and Trevor stood there in a stained tank top and basketball shorts, a beer in his hand. He was 6 feet 2 inches, broad-shouldered with the kind of build that intimidated normal people. "Yeah, the hell do you want?" Dante smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "Trevor Brooks, we need to talk about Sophia." Trevor's expression changed from irritation to recognition to fear in the span of 3 seconds. Everyone in this city knew Dante Nakamura's face, even if they'd never met him. "Look, man, I don't want any trouble. Whatever she told you. She told me you put your hands on her multiple times. She told me you threatened her daughter." Dante's voice was conversational, almost friendly. That's what made it terrifying. "Now, I'm going to give you 2 options, and I suggest you choose carefully." Trevor tried to puff up his chest. "You can't come here threatening me. I got rights. I'll call the cops." One of Dante's men chuckled darkly. "Option 1. Dante continued as if Trevor hadn't spoken. "You never speak to Sophia again. Forget she exists. If I hear you've even driven down her street, what happens next will be the last mistake you ever make." And option 2. Dante's smile widened. "There is no option 2. I just wanted you to feel like you had a choice." Trevor's hand tightened around his beer bottle. For a moment, it looked like he might try something stupid. Then, reality set in. This wasn't some woman he could bully. This was Dante Nakamura, and the 2 men flanking him looked like they ate guys like Trevor for breakfast. Fine, whatever. She wasn't that good anyway. Dante's hand shot out faster than Trevor could blink, gripping his throat and slamming him against the door frame. The beer bottle shattered on the ground. We have the taken." "Let me be crystal clear," Dante said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "If you ever speak about her like that again, I won't send warnings. I won't have conversations. I'll erase you from existence so thoroughly that people will forget you ever lived. Do we understand each other?" Trevor nodded frantically, his face turning red. Dante released him and stepped back, smoothing his jacket as if nothing had happened. "Enjoy your evening, Trevor." 3 hours later, Dante pulled up to Sophia's small apartment. The lights were on in the second-floor unit. He'd texted her that he was coming. Didn't want to frighten her. She opened the door before he could knock. Still in her work clothes, her face scrubbed clean of makeup, the injuries looked worse without it. "Did you? He won't bother you again. I made sure of it." Sophia's hand flew to her mouth and fresh tears spilled over. But these were different. These were relief. "Thank you, God. Thank you so much. I don't know how I can ever repay you." "Don't need to repay me, but we need to talk about your living situation. This apartment complex doesn't have security, and your locks are substandard. I have a property about 10 minutes from here. 3 bedrooms, gated community, security system. It's empty. You and Bella should move there." "Mr. Nakamura, I can't accept that. I can't afford. It's part of your employment package. Consider it a housing benefit." Sophia laughed through her tears, a sound that hit him square in the chest. "You're making that up completely. But you'll still accept it because you're smart enough to know it's the right choice for Bella." Before Sophia could respond, a small voice came from behind her. "Mama, who's at the door?" A little girl appeared clutching a stuffed rabbit. She had her mother's eyes and a halo of curly hair pulled into 2 puffs. She looked at Dante with open curiosity rather than fear. "Bella baby, this is Mr. He's Mama's boss. You're really tall," Bella observed. Dante found himself crouching down to her level, something he'd never done for anyone. "You're very observant." "What's that mean?" "It means you notice things." "That's a good quality." Bella beamed. "Mama says I notice too much sometimes." "Your mama is very smart." "Are you the reason those nice men were at my school today?" "Mrs. Chun said they were making sure I was safe." Dante glanced up at Sophia, who was watching them with an expression he couldn't quite read. "I wanted to make sure you and your mama are always safe. Like a superhero, something like that." Bella considered this seriously. "You can stay for dinner if you want. We're having spaghetti. Mama makes the best spaghetti." And that's how Dante Nakamura, one of the most feared men in the city, found himself sitting at a cramped kitchen table eating slightly overcooked spaghetti while an 8-year-old told him about her science project on butterflies. The next 3 weeks passed in a strange new rhythm. Sophia and Bella moved into the apartment Dante provided. It was in a safe neighborhood with good schools. And for the first time in years, Sophia slept through the night without jumping at every sound. She still worked at the mansion, but things were different now. Dante found excuses to be wherever she was working. They'd talk, not boss and employee, but two people discovering each other. One night, long after everyone else had left, Sophia found Dante in his study, staring at an old photograph. "You're still here." "Ah," he said without looking up. "I could say the same to you." He turned the photograph toward her. It showed a young Korean woman with kind eyes and a shy smile. "My mother," he explained. "She died when I was 12. Sophia moved closer, studying the image. "She was beautiful. She was also trapped in a marriage with a violent man. My father was a powerful businessman, well respected. No one knew what happened behind closed doors. She stayed because she thought she was protecting me. That leaving would make things worse." His voice was hollow. "She was wrong. He killed her in a drunken rage one night. Made it look like an accident. Dante." It was the first time she'd used his first name. "When I saw you that morning with blood on your face, all I could see was her. All those times she tried to hide the bruises, the split lips, the broken ribs. I swore after she died that I would never let another woman suffer like that. Not if I had the power to stop it." Sophia's hand found his, their fingers intertwining naturally. "Your mother would be proud of the man you became. Would she? I've done terrible things. Sophia built an empire on fear and blood. You also protected a stranger and her daughter when you didn't have to. You gave us safety when we had none." That's what she'd see. They stood there in the dim light of the study, hands clasped, both understanding that something fundamental had shifted between them. "I'm falling for you," Dante said quietly. "I shouldn't be. You work for me. You're dealing with trauma. The timing is terrible, but I can't seem to stop it." Sophia's breath caught. "I feel it too. You scare me, but not in the way Trevor did. You scare me because I want to trust you, and trust has only hurt me before. That's what scares me most." Dante turned to face her fully, his free hand coming up to cup her cheek, careful of the fading bruises. "Then let's be scared together." When he kissed her, it was soft, tentative, asking permission with every second. Sophia melted into it, her hands gripping his shirt as if he might disappear. But happiness in Dante's world was never simple. For weeks after their first kiss, Trevor resurfaced. He'd been drinking with his friends, working up courage and rage in equal measure. He'd been humiliated, threatened, forced to slink away like a coward. His pride couldn't take it, so he waited outside Bella's school with two of his buddies, planning to grab the girl and force Sophia to come back to him. They never got close. Dante's security detail saw them the moment they approached the school grounds. Within minutes, Trevor and his friends were restrained. Bella was whisked away to safety, and Dante received a phone call that made his blood turn to ice. He found Sophia at the school holding a sobbing Bella, both of them surrounded by his men. He tried to take her. Sophia gasped when she saw him. "He actually tried to take my baby." Dante knelt in front of them, his usual composure cracking. "She's safe. You're both safe. I promise you this ends tonight." "Where is he being held?" "Waiting for me." Sophia grabbed his arm. "Don't kill him, please. I don't want that on your conscience because of me. He tried to kidnap your daughter." "I know, but there are other ways. Legal ways. Your connections can make sure he goes to prison, right? Not just a slap on the wrist." Dante studied her face, seeing the strength beneath the fear. She wasn't asking for him to let Trevor go. She was asking him to be better than his worst instincts. "For you," he said finally. "Only for you." Trevor Brooks was arrested that night. With Dante's connections and resources, the DA had an airtight case within 48 hours. Assault, attempted kidnapping, stalking, violation of a restraining order. Dante had helped Sophia file. Trevor would spend the next 8 years behind bars. But the incident had consequences beyond Trevor's fate. Kenji, Dante's second-in-command and cousin, confronted him 2 days later in his office. "The men are talking," Kenji said without preamble, "about you and the maid. Her name is Sophia. Her name doesn't matter. What matters is that you're compromised, making decisions based on emotion rather than logic, putting organization resources toward a personal matter." Dante's eyes went cold. "Are you questioning my leadership?" "I'm questioning your judgment. This woman and her child have made you soft. What happens when our enemies realize that? When they see you have a weakness they can exploit, then I'll handle it like I've handled everything else by going to war over a woman. Hang, think about what you're doing. She's not one of us. She doesn't understand this life. And that little girl, careful," Dante warned, his voice dropping dangerously low. "Be very careful about what you say next." Kenji ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "I'm trying to protect you." Protect what we've built. Your father would never have. My father was a monster who beat my mother to death. If you're using him as a moral compass, we have bigger problems than my relationship with Sophia." The room fell silent. Kenji's jaw worked, but no words came out. Kenji's withers a love. "I make my own choices." Dante continued. "I always have. Sophia and Bella are under my protection, and they will remain so. Anyone who has a problem with that can leave. That includes you, cousin." Kenji stared at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I hope you know what you're doing." "So do I." 6 months later, everything had changed. Sophia no longer worked as a maid. Dante had discovered she had a business degree she'd never been able to use. So he put her in charge of managing his legitimate enterprises, restaurants, real estate, import businesses. She was brilliant at it, bringing an organization and attention to detail that impressed even his most skeptical associates. Bella thrived. She called Dante Uncle Dante and had started taking taekwondo lessons that he insisted on personally supervising. He was surprisingly patient with her, never raising his voice, always encouraging. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, the three of them were at the park. Bella was on the swings, pumping her legs and laughing as she went higher and higher. "She's fearless," Dante observed, watching her. "She gets that from you," Sophia said, leaning into his side. "From me. You taught her it's okay to be strong, that she doesn't have to make herself small to make others comfortable. That's a gift." Dante was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Sophia's breath stopped. Mom, I know it's fast," he said, turning to face her fully. "I know we've been through hell to get here. I know my world is dangerous and complicated and not what you probably imagined for yourself." He opened the box, revealing a simple but elegant diamond ring. "But I also know that I've never felt more human than I do when I'm with you and Bella. You make me want to be better. You make me believe I can be better." Tears streamed down Sophia's face. "Sophia Martinez, will you marry me?" "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." He slid the ring onto her finger. And when he kissed her, Bella's delighted shriek carried across the playground. "Mama's getting married. Uncle Dante is going to be my uncle for real." They laughed, pulling Bella into their embrace. The three of them forming a unit that 6 months ago would have seemed impossible. That night, after Bella was asleep, Sophia and Dante sat on the balcony of the mansion under the stars. "Are you scared?" he asked. "Terrified," she admitted. "But not of you. I'm scared I'll wake up and this will all be a dream. That I'll be back in that old apartment, afraid and alone." "You're never going to be alone again. That's my promise to you. You've already kept so many promises." "Then what's one more?" "I love you, Dante Nakamura." "I love you, Sophia Martinez." Soon to be Sophia Nakamura. They stayed there until dawn broke over the city. Two people who'd found each other in the darkest circumstances and chosen to build something beautiful from the ashes. Because sometimes the person who seems most dangerous is actually the one who will protect you, the fiercest. Sometimes love finds you when you've stopped looking for it, and sometimes the best endings come from the worst beginnings. Thank you so much for watching this story. If you enjoyed it and haven't subscribed yet, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss our next emotional tale. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. I love hearing from you all around the world. See you in the next. 2 years after their engagement, Dante Nakamura stood at the altar of the small chapel overlooking the Pacific coastline. The morning sun filtered through stained glass windows, casting rainbow patterns across the white roses that lined the aisle. He adjusted his midnight blue suit, a departure from his usual black, and watched the door at the back of the chapel. His hands, steady through countless dangerous negotiations, trembled slightly as he waited for his bride. Kenji stood beside him as best man, having long since made peace with his cousin's choice. The months following Trevor's arrest had shown him what Dante already knew. Sophia Martinez wasn't a weakness to be exploited. She was strength personified, grace under pressure, and intelligence that complemented Dante's strategic mind perfectly. She had transformed not just Dante's personal life, but his business operations as well. Her organizational skills had streamlined their legitimate enterprises, increasing profits by 30% in the first year alone. More importantly, she had given Dante something he'd never thought possible, a reason to build rather than just protect. The chapel doors opened, and Sophia appeared in a flowing ivory dress that seemed to capture every ray of sunlight streaming through the windows. Her hair was swept into an elegant updo, small pearls scattered throughout like stars against the dark silk. She carried a bouquet of white peonies and baby's breath, her hands steady despite the magnitude of the moment. Bella walked beside her as maid of honor, wearing a soft pink dress that made her look like a princess from her favorite fairy tales. She scattered rose petals with the seriousness of someone entrusted with an important mission, her small face scrunched in concentration as she made sure each petal landed exactly where it should. When Sophia reached the altar, Dante took her hands and felt the tremor that ran through her fingers. "You're perfect," he whispered, meant only for her ears. "So are you," she whispered back, and in that moment, surrounded by the handful of people who truly mattered to them, everything else faded away. The ceremony was simple, intimate, exactly what they both wanted. No ostentatious displays of wealth, no political maneuvering disguised as celebration. Just two people who had found each other in the darkness and chosen to step into the light together. When the minister asked if anyone objected to their union, Dante's security team tensed slightly, old habits dying hard. But the chapel remained silent except for the distant sound of waves crashing against the cliffs below. They exchanged rings, simple platinum bands that felt heavier with meaning than the most elaborate jewelry Dante could have afforded. When he was pronounced husband and wife with Sophia, when he was told he could kiss his bride, Dante cupped her face in his hands and kissed her with all the tenderness he'd learned from loving her, all the passion that still surprised him with its intensity, and all the promise of the future they were about to build together. The reception was held at Dante's mansion, transformed for the occasion with thousands of white lights strung through the gardens and elegant round tables scattered across the expanse of lawn. The guest list was small but meaningful. Sophia's mother, who had grown strong enough to attend thanks to the continued experimental treatments Dante insisted on funding. Key members of Dante's organization who had come to respect Sophia's position in their world, and a few close friends who had watched their love story unfold with wonder and approval. Mrs. Chun, Bella's teacher who had become something of a family friend, sat at a table near the dance floor, beaming as she watched her former student twirl in her pink dress. As the evening progressed, Dante found himself studying his new wife as she moved through their guests, ensuring everyone felt welcomed and comfortable. She had a gift for making people feel seen, whether it was his most hardened associate or the elderly woman from the flower shop who had provided the wedding arrangements. This was what Kenji had failed to understand in those early months. Sophia didn't make Dante weak. She made him more effective, more strategic, more human. His enemies had learned this the hard way when they tried to exploit what they saw as a vulnerability, only to discover that attacking Dante's family brought out a focused ruthlessness they'd never encountered before. The Moretti family had tested this theory 6 months after the engagement was announced. Vincent Moretti, seeking to expand his territory into areas Dante controlled, had made the mistake of suggesting that Dante's attachment to his family made him an easy target. He'd hired men to follow Bella to school, thinking intimidation would be enough to bring Dante to the negotiating table on Moretti's terms. Instead, it had triggered a response so swift and comprehensive that the Moretti organization found itself dismantled within 72 hours. Dante had not killed Vincent. That would have been too simple. Instead, he had systematically destroyed every aspect of Moretti's operation, seizing assets, turning allies, and exposing corruption that landed Vincent in federal prison for tax evasion and racketeering. The message was clear: Dante Nakamura's family was not a weakness to be exploited. It was a line that could not be crossed without facing consequences that would end careers and destroy lives. Now, watching Sophia laugh as Bella dragged her toward the dance floor, Dante felt the profound satisfaction that came from having protected what mattered most while building something lasting and beautiful. The little girl who had once offered him spaghetti dinner in a cramped kitchen was now his daughter in every way that mattered, legally adopted 3 months after the engagement when Sophia had tearfully asked if he wanted to make their family official in the eyes of the law. Dante had been surprised by how much the question had affected him, how deeply he wanted the right to call Bella his daughter, to be listed as her father on school forms and medical documents, to have the world know that this brilliant, fearless child was his to protect and guide in love. The adoption process had been surprisingly emotional. Sitting in the lawyer's office, signing papers that would legally bind him to Bella forever, Dante had found himself thinking about his own father, about the kind of man he'd sworn never to become. Violence had been the only language his father spoke, control the only currency he understood. But watching Bella practice her letters at the kitchen table, helping her with homework, teaching her to defend herself not through aggression, but through confidence and awareness, Dante was discovering what it meant to be a different kind of strong. The kind that protected without destroying, that led through love rather than fear. 3 months into their marriage, Sophia came to him with news that would change everything once again. She found him in his study late one evening, reviewing reports from their newest restaurant venture, a project she had spearheaded to expand their legitimate business interests into sustainable dining concepts. "Dante," she said, and something in her voice made him look up immediately, setting aside the financial projections that had been holding his attention. She was standing in the doorway, her hands clasped in front of her, a nervous energy radiating from her that he recognized from the early days of their relationship when she'd been afraid to trust the good things happening in her life. "We need to talk," she continued, stepping into the room and closing the door behind her. Dante's mind immediately went to business concerns, potential threats they'd need to address, problems requiring his attention. But when Sophia sat down across from his desk and placed a small white stick on the mahogany surface between them, his world stopped completely. The pregnancy test showed 2 pink lines, clear and undeniable. Dante stared at it for a long moment, his strategic mind trying to process the magnitude of this development while his heart raced with an emotion too large and complex to name. "You're pregnant," he said, the words feeling strange in his mouth, heavy with implication and possibility. Sophia nodded, her eyes searching his face for any sign of his reaction. "Are you happy about it?" he asked, because suddenly that was the only thing that mattered. Her answer, her feelings, her wants and fears and hopes for this new life growing inside her. A slow smile spread across her face, transforming her nervous energy into something radiant and warm. "I'm terrified," she admitted, "but yes, I'm happy. I want this baby, Dante. I want our baby." He was around the desk and pulling her into his arms before she'd finished speaking, holding her against him as if he could somehow absorb all her fears and doubts, leaving only the joy and anticipation. "A baby," he murmured into her hair, and for the first time since she'd walked into the room, the reality of it hit him fully. They were going to have a child together, a new life created from their love, a future that extended beyond just the 3 of them into something even more beautiful and complex and wonderful. The practical considerations would come later, the security concerns, the need to further legitimize their business operations, the questions about how to raise a child in their unique world. But in that moment, holding his wife and knowing that their family was growing, Dante felt only gratitude for the path that had led them here. Bella's reaction to the news was pure, unfiltered excitement. When they told her over breakfast the following morning, she jumped from her chair and danced around the kitchen, chanting that she was going to be a big sister, that she would teach the baby everything she knew, that this was the best thing that had ever happened in the history of the world. Her enthusiasm was infectious, washing away the last of Sophia's concerns about how to blend their existing family dynamic with the new addition. That night, Bella fell asleep between them on the big bed, her hand resting on Sophia's still flat stomach as she whispered plans and promises to her future sibling. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though not without its challenges. Sophia's morning sickness was severe enough to require adjustments to her work schedule, something that frustrated her independent nature but allowed Dante to see her vulnerability in a new way. He found himself anticipating her needs before she voiced them, keeping saltines by the bed for early morning nausea, scheduling important meetings for the afternoons when she felt strongest, hiring additional staff to handle the tasks that became too overwhelming as her energy fluctuated. It was a different kind of protection than he was used to providing, more subtle and nurturing, but no less important. Kenji proved to be an unexpected source of support during this time. His initial reservations about Sophia long since replaced by genuine affection and respect. When news of the pregnancy reached their associates, He was the first to congratulate Dante and offer additional security resources, understanding without being told that protecting Sophia now meant protecting the future of the Nakamura family line. The baby represented continuity, legacy, everything Dante had built taking root in the next generation. As Sophia's pregnancy progressed, they made the decision to step back from some of the more dangerous aspects of Dante's business operations. This wasn't weakness or retreat, but strategic evolution, a recognition that their priorities had shifted toward building something sustainable and secure for their growing family. The legitimate businesses that Sophia had developed were thriving, providing more than enough income to maintain their lifestyle while offering the stability and legal protection their children would need. Dante began delegating more operational responsibilities to trusted lieutenants, maintaining oversight and final decision-making authority while removing himself from day-to-day activities that might put him or his family at risk. The baby was born on a Tuesday in October, arriving 3 weeks early but healthy and strong. Sophia's labor was intense but relatively quick, lasting only 8 hours from start to finish. Dante had never felt more helpless than during those hours. Watching the woman he loved endure pain he couldn't take away, knowing that all his power and resources meant nothing in the face of the natural process bringing their child into the world. But when the doctor placed their son in his arms, when he looked down at the tiny face that was somehow both unfamiliar and utterly recognizable, Dante understood that everything he'd ever done had led to this moment. They named him Gabriel, a name that meant strength of God, and he was perfect in every way that mattered. Dark hair like his father's, Sophia's expressive eyes, and a temperament that seemed to shift between peaceful observation and determined crying depending on his immediate needs. Bella was completely smitten, insisting on helping with every aspect of his care, from diaper changes to feeding time to the endless rounds of laundry that seemed to multiply exponentially with each passing day. The first few months of Gabriel's life passed in a blur of sleepless nights, endless feedings, and the profound adjustment that came with expanding their family from 3 to 4. Dante discovered reserves of patience he'd never known he possessed, spending hours walking the halls of the mansion at 3 in the morning, Gabriel cradled against his chest, whispering stories about the world his son would inherit and the values that would guide him through it. These were sacred hours, quiet time when father and son bonded in the darkness, building the foundation of trust and love that would define their relationship for years to come. Sophia proved to be a natural mother, though she struggled initially with the loss of independence that came with caring for an infant. She had worked throughout her pregnancy, maintaining her role in managing their business interests, but the reality of sleepless nights and constant feeding schedules made it impossible to maintain the same level of professional engagement. Dante watched her work through this transition with characteristic determination, finding ways to stay connected to their operations while prioritizing Gabriel's needs and her own recovery from childbirth. 6 months after Gabriel's birth, an opportunity arose that would test everything they'd built together. The Yamamoto clan, one of the most powerful criminal organizations on the West Coast, approached Dante about a partnership that would significantly expand their territory and influence while providing access to shipping routes they'd been seeking for years. The potential profits were enormous, but the deal would require Dante to spend several months in Japan, establishing relationships and overseeing the integration of their operations. It was exactly the kind of opportunity his younger self would have seized without hesitation, the chance to build an empire that could dominate the Pacific criminal landscape for generations. But sitting in his study, reviewing the proposal while Gabriel slept in a bassinet nearby and Sophia worked at her laptop across the room, Dante found himself questioning whether expansion was worth the cost. The months in Japan would mean missing Gabriel's first words, his first steps, the countless small moments that made up the early stages of his son's development. It would mean leaving Sophia to manage both their business interests and their family responsibilities largely on her own, something she was certainly capable of, but shouldn't have to do simply because an opportunity had presented itself. More importantly, it would mean exposing their family to new risks, new enemies, new complications that might threaten the stability they'd worked so hard to build. The Yamamoto clan was powerful but also volatile, known for internal conflicts that had destabilized previous partnerships. Aligning with them would provide benefits, but also paint targets on the backs of everyone Dante loved, something he was no longer willing to accept simply for the promise of greater wealth or influence. When he declined the partnership, citing family obligations and strategic concerns about overextension, some of his associates questioned his judgment. A few suggested that marriage and children had made him soft, that he was losing the hunger that had built his empire in the first place. Kenji, however, understood immediately, recognizing that Dante's refusal represented strength rather than weakness, wisdom rather than fear. The decision to prioritize family over expansion, stability over growth, was the mark of a leader who had evolved beyond simple accumulation of power towards something more meaningful and sustainable. The choice proved prescient when the Yamamoto partnership they'd offered to Dante fell apart spectacularly 6 months later, resulting in a violent conflict that left dozens dead and several major operations exposed to federal investigation. Dante watched the news coverage of the arrests and seizures with relief rather than regret, knowing that his family was safe because he'd chosen to protect what he had rather than risk everything for what he might gain. As Gabriel grew from infant to toddler, the dynamics of their household shifted and adapted to accommodate his boundless energy and insatiable curiosity. The mansion that had once been a fortress of solitude became filled with the sounds of family life, children's laughter echoing through halls that had previously known only whispered conversations and serious business discussions. Dante found himself child-proofing rooms that had never needed such considerations, installing safety gates and cabinet locks with the same methodical precision he'd once applied to security systems and surveillance equipment. Bella embraced her role as big sister with enthusiasm that sometimes bordered on overwhelming protectiveness. She appointed herself Gabriel's primary guardian, insisting on helping with his meals, his baths, and his bedtime stories. When he began crawling, she would follow him around the house, removing potential hazards and narrating his adventures as if she were documenting the exploits of a famous explorer. Dante often found them together in the mornings, Bella reading picture books to Gabriel while he gnawed contentedly on his favorite teething toy, both of them completely absorbed in their sibling bond. The legitimate businesses that Sophia had developed continued to thrive under her guidance, even as she balanced her professional responsibilities with motherhood. Her restaurants had earned recognition for their innovative approaches to sustainable dining, while the real estate ventures had expanded into affordable housing projects that generated both profit and positive community impact. Dante watched with pride as she testified before city council meetings about zoning regulations and environmental standards, representing their interests with the same intelligence and grace she brought to every aspect of their lives. Their success in legitimate business ventures provided opportunities to distance themselves further from the criminal enterprises that had originally built Dante's fortune. This transition wasn't without complications, as competitors and rivals tested their resolve, assuming that the shift toward legitimacy indicated weakness or retreat. Instead, it demonstrated evolution, a strategic pivot that maintained their core strengths while reducing vulnerabilities that could threaten their family's future. The most significant test of this new approach came when Gabriel was 18 months old and walking with the determined wobbliness that characterized toddlers discovering their independence. Sophia had taken both children to the farmers market downtown, a weekly tradition that allowed them to support local vendors while giving Gabriel exposure to new sights, sounds, and experiences. It was meant to be a simple family outing, the kind of normal activity that represented everything they'd built together, but it became something much more dangerous when Marcus Torino decided to make his move. Torino was old-school organized crime, the kind of man who viewed Dante's evolution toward legitimacy as both an opportunity and an insult. He'd been circling their operations for months, looking for weaknesses to exploit, convinced that family life had made the Nakamura organization vulnerable to aggressive tactics. His plan was simple but effective: take Sophia and the children hostage, force Dante into negotiations from a position of desperation, and seize control of territory that Torino felt should rightfully be his. What Torino failed to understand was that Dante's security arrangements had evolved along with his priorities. Sophia and the children were never truly alone. protected by layers of surveillance and response teams that operated invisibly but efficiently. When Torino's men approached the farmers' market with weapons and ill intent, they found themselves facing opposition they hadn't anticipated: professional security personnel who neutralized the threat before it could endanger any civilians. The entire incident lasted less than 3 minutes, but its implications reverberated through their world for months afterward. Dante's response was swift and comprehensive, targeting not just Torino himself, but the entire network that had supported the attack. Within a week, Torino found himself facing federal charges for attempted kidnapping and racketeering, his assets frozen, his organization dismantled, his reputation destroyed. The message was unmistakable. Attacking the Nakamura family was not just dangerous, it was career-ending. More importantly for Dante, the incident confirmed that their security arrangements were adequate to protect what mattered most while maintaining the appearance of normal family life. Sophia and the children had been unaware of the danger until after it passed, continuing their shopping and conversations without interruption while professionals handled the threat. This was exactly the kind of protection Dante had envisioned: comprehensive but invisible, effective without being intrusive. In the months following the Torino incident, their family life settled into a new rhythm that balanced security concerns with the desire for normalcy. Gabriel continued to develop at his own pace, reaching milestones that filled Dante with wonder and pride. First words led to first sentences, tentative steps became confident running, and the curious infant became an adventurous toddler with opinions about everything from breakfast options to bedtime stories. Bella thrived in her role as the family's eldest child, excelling in school while maintaining her protective instincts toward her younger brother. Her teachers consistently praised her leadership abilities and academic performance, noting that she seemed mature beyond her years while retaining the creativity and enthusiasm that made her a joy to teach. Dante often wondered how much of her accelerated development stemmed from the unusual circumstances of their family life versus her natural intelligence and Sophia's dedicated parenting. For her part, Sophia had found ways to integrate her professional ambitions with her family responsibilities that satisfied both aspects of her identity. She worked primarily from home offices, attending meetings via video conference when possible, and traveling only when absolutely necessary. The flexibility of their business arrangements allowed her to be present for Gabriel's important moments while maintaining oversight of operations that continued to grow and evolve under her guidance. Their marriage had deepened through the challenges and changes of new parenthood, strengthening bonds that had been forged in crisis and tested by success. They'd learned to communicate more effectively about everything from child-rearing philosophies to business strategies, developing a partnership that functioned smoothly across all aspects of their shared life. The passion that had drawn them together remained strong, but it was now accompanied by deeper intimacy that came from facing challenges together and building something meaningful from their combined strengths. As Gabriel's second birthday approached, Dante found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this point. The mansion that had once felt empty despite its size was now filled with the warmth of family life. Children's artwork decorating walls that had previously displayed only expensive but impersonal art. The business empire he'd built through determination and strategic thinking had evolved into something more sustainable and fulfilling, providing security for his family while contributing positively to their community. Looking toward the future, Dante saw possibilities rather than threats, opportunities for growth and development that didn't require compromising the values they'd established or endangering the people they loved. Gabriel would grow up knowing that he was protected and cherished, that his father was a man who had chosen family over empire, love over fear, building over destroying. Bella would continue developing her own unique strengths and interests, supported by parents who understood that her potential was limitless if properly nurtured and guided. And Sophia, his partner in every sense that mattered, would continue being the heart of everything they'd built together. The woman who had taught him that strength could be gentle, that power could be used for protection rather than domination, that love was not a weakness to be exploited, but a source of unshakable strength. The story that had begun with violence and fear had evolved into something beautiful and lasting, proof that people could change, that circumstances could improve, that love really could transform everything it touched. Sometimes the most dangerous man was indeed the one who would protect you most fiercely, and sometimes the best endings really did come from the worst beginnings, building something magnificent from the ashes of what came before.